In the summer of 1885, 7 brothers built a town in Texas, and then everyone inside it disappeared. No bodies were found, no screams were heard, just empty homes, quiet streets, and one question that still chills experts to this day. What really happened in Quicksilver Creek? If you love dark true stories, hidden science, and terrifying mysteries from American history, this story is for you. Hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss a single part. And drop a comment to tell me what state you're watching from. Now let's begin. Part 1. The Town That Vanished. In July 1885, government investigators arrived at Quicksilver Creek, Texas. It was supposed to be a growing mining town. But when the team arrived, they found nothing but silence. Streets were empty. Homes were abandoned. The air was still. Even the birds didn't sing. What they found inside the old mine shocked the U.S. Geological Survey. Tucked inside dusty offices and rotting cabinets were hundreds of detailed medical records. Over 300 names, men, women, and children, listed as dead or missing. All had been poisoned slowly by mercury. And every record had the same signature. Kruger. 7 brothers. 1 family. All their names would later be removed from official records, as if they had never existed. So who were the Krugers? They weren't like other miners. Heinrich Kruger, the eldest, was 42. He had studied metallurgy in Berlin. The other 6, Friedrich, Wilhelm, Otto, Gustav, Bernhard, and Klaus, each brought special knowledge: chemistry, engineering, medicine, mathematics, geology, and mining experience from Spain. In 1883, the brothers left Prussia and came to Texas. They built a settlement near cinnabar deposits, a red ore that holds mercury. The area was far from big towns, but close enough to transport goods through a nearby railroad station in Junction, Texas. They named it Quicksilver Creek. By early 1884, over 200 workers and their families had moved there. The Krugers paid them well, $2 a day, housing, and even free medical care. Dr. Otto Kruger treated everyone personally. People trusted him. The town looked nothing like the usual wild frontier camps. Streets were neat and square. The Kruger homes and buildings sat on a small hill. Otto had his own clinic. Friedrich had a lab. Wilhelm kept engineering records. Everything felt safe, organized, modern. The brothers said they had created a safer way to extract mercury. Normal mining methods filled the air with deadly vapor. The Krugers' system seemed cleaner, more controlled. Less smoke, fewer accidents. Workers thought it was a miracle. But it wasn't. What the Krugers had done wasn't safer, it was smarter. They weren't trying to protect their workers. They were studying them. Each job site had a different amount of mercury exposure. Workers were rotated through areas on carefully planned schedules. Otto recorded every detail of their health: headaches, tremors, mood changes, memory loss. He tracked every cough and twitch. He even took notes on their children. The Krugers weren't just running a mine. They were running an experiment. And no one knew. By spring 1885, strange things began to happen. People started getting sick faster than expected. But it wasn't the usual signs of poisoning. The symptoms were organized, almost like each person had been assigned a different reaction. Some men shook constantly but could still think clearly. Others stayed strong physically but forgot their own names. The worst signs came from the children. On May 15, 1885, a woman named Margaret Donnelly was hanging laundry when she noticed her son, Thomas, acting oddly. The 8-year-old was walking in perfect circles in the yard. His arms stayed stiff at his sides. His eyes stared straight ahead. He didn't blink. She called his name. No answer. She touched his shoulder. He kept walking, as if she wasn't there. She wasn't the only mother to notice. All over town, kids were behaving in strange, silent ways. Some walked in straight lines until they hit a fence, then turned around and kept going. Others stood still for hours, moving their hands in patterns, almost like silent sign language. And the scariest part, these kids didn't know they were doing it. They could talk, they could eat, they could play, But sooner or later, they'd go back to those strange motions like something inside was taking over. Otto Kruger came quickly when people called him. He wore his doctor's coat. He carried his black bag. He looked calm, professional, friendly. He examined the children carefully. To the parents, it seemed like he truly cared. But inside his mind, Otto was already writing new notes. To him, this wasn't a tragedy. It was progress. And it was only the beginning. To be continued. If this story gave you chills, don't forget to subscribe, share it with someone who loves dark history, and leave a comment with your thoughts or questions. Stay tuned for part 2, The Doctor's Notes, where we dive deeper into Otto's secret files and the chilling system the Krugers used to study the human mind. The Kruger brothers of Quicksilver Creek, Part 2, The Doctor's Tonic. Dr. Otto Kruger stood in Margaret Donnelly's home, carefully examining her son, Thomas. The boy still moved in slow, perfect circles across the yard, arms stiff, eyes blank. Otto checked his heartbeat, watched his pupils, and tapped gently on the boy's knees to test his reflexes. After nearly an hour, he finally stood up and gave Margaret a reassuring smile. "It is nothing to worry about, Mrs. Donnelly," he said in his soft German-accented English. "A small nervous condition, perhaps caused by the excitement of spring, or too much rich food. I will prepare a tonic. He should be back to normal in a few days." Margaret breathed a sigh of relief. A doctor had spoken. Everything would be okay. But Otto Kruger had not seen this before. He had created it. The strange behaviors in Quicksilver Creek's children were no accident. They were the results of a carefully planned experiment. Since the town's founding, the Kruger brothers had been studying the effects of mercury on the human brain, especially in children whose nervous systems were still developing. The town's flour, handed out for free to every family, had been laced with tiny amounts of mercury dust. Not enough to kill, just enough to change things, slowly, quietly. The tonic Otto gave young Thomas wasn't medicine. It was another dose, stronger than the flour, more direct. It wasn't meant to cure anything. It was meant to speed up the symptoms. Inside his private lab, Otto recorded every detail in a thick, leather-bound book. He wrote down how long it took Thomas to walk in circles, how often he blinked, and how he responded to light, sound, and his mother's voice. These weren't just notes. They were data points. And Thomas wasn't the only child being watched. Dozens of children in Quicksilver Creek were showing similar symptoms. Otto kept files on all of them, neatly labeled and organized. His records were horrifying in their precision. While most studies of mercury poisoning focused on dead bodies or scattered cases, Otto's work followed every stage of the illness, from the first strange behavior to the final, heartbreaking breakdown. And it was all happening in real time. As days passed, the children's symptoms worsened. At first, their strange movements were dismissed as odd habits. But soon, they couldn't be ignored. Children began to lose weight. Some stopped speaking. Others responded to voices but drifted into silence, using only their hands to communicate through strange signs no one else understood. Some became so sensitive to light that they stayed in dark rooms all day, only stepping outside at night like tiny ghosts wandering through the quiet streets. The adults of Quicksilver Creek were also suffering. Miners who had worked the deepest parts of the shafts began to shake. Their hands trembled too much to use tools. Some lost teeth in just a few weeks. Others forgot simple things, names, directions, even how to tie their boots. Gentlemen started yelling at their wives. Calm workers picked fights over nothing. No one knew the truth. These symptoms weren't caused by accidents or bad luck. They were being designed. The Kruger brothers had divided the workers into test groups. Each man was sent to a different part of the mine, where mercury levels had been carefully adjusted by Wilhelm's engineering work. Gustav used his math skills to calculate the perfect amounts of exposure, like measuring medicine, but with poison. Heinrich Kruger, the oldest brother, kept the entire system running like a machine. He made sure no one was exposed to too much mercury at once. That would kill them too fast. And that wasn't the goal. The goal was to watch the full journey, from healthy to broken. From man to patient. From patient to something else. As summer turned to fall, the experiment entered a new phase. The Krugers hadn't expected what came next. Mercury wasn't just affecting individuals. It was breaking apart families. Loving parents became cold and cruel. Kind wives became silent and distant. People who had lived and worked together for years no longer trusted each other. Fights broke out in homes, then in the streets. James McReynolds, one of the first men hired by the Krugers, was known for his quiet strength and calm nature. But now, he was changing. He had fits of rage, screaming and smashing furniture. Then, just as suddenly, he'd go quiet, and spend the next day fixing everything he had broken, not remembering why he had done it. Otto Kruger labeled him, Subject 47. He wrote, greater than, male, age 32. Exposure level C2. Duration, 14 months. Loss of impulse control. Retains technical skill. Shows regret. Moved to level C3 for further study. The brothers had created their own system for mercury poisoning. Stage A meant small symptoms, tremors, mood swings, memory slips. Stage B meant deeper problems, shaking hands, loose teeth, angry outbursts. Stage C was worse. Hallucinations, total confusion, loss of identity. Stage D, that was the end. Those people were moved to a quiet area of town. The Krugers said it was to give them rest and peace. But the truth was darker. Stage D was for people the brothers were ready to watch die. By the end of 1885, half the adults in Quicksilver Creek were at Stage B or beyond. The once busy mining town had grown quiet, tense. People spoke in whispers. They walked quickly. They avoided each other's eyes. No one knew who would break next. Even the children, who first showed signs of illness, were now entering Otto's later study phases. Their hand signs grew more complex. Some stopped sleeping. Some began to mimic each other's strange behaviors, as if they shared one infected mind. Quicksilver Creek was dying, not from violence or disease, but from the cold, careful hand of science. And no one outside the town knew. Not yet. To be continued. If you made it this far, you're officially one of us, someone who loves dark history, true horror, and the stories no one wants to talk about. Subscribe, like, and comment below. Let me know what part of the story chilled you the most. And get ready for part 3. The Quiet Ones, where strange drawings begin to appear, and not everyone in Quicksilver Creek is who they seem to be. The Kruger Brothers of Quicksilver Creek, Part 3, The False Doctors. By late 1885, the small schoolhouse in Quicksilver Creek had become nearly empty. Many children stopped attending. Those who still came sat quietly, staring into space for long stretches while their teacher, Mrs. Elizabeth Hoffman, tried her best to keep order. But even she was slowly losing her grip. The children were not just sick, they were fading. What no one knew was that Mrs. Hoffman herself was part of the experiment. She was one of the few educated people in the town, which made her valuable to the Kruger brothers. Otto had placed her in a special category, group educational. Her job wasn't just to teach anymore. She was a subject in a larger test, one that tracked how mercury poisoning affected smart, trained minds. Each day, her food included a carefully measured amount of mercury. Her drinking water came from a well that the Krugers had poisoned on purpose. At first, she blamed her forgetfulness on stress. But things kept getting worse. She couldn't remember lessons she had taught for years. Simple math confused her. Sometimes, she lost track of what day it was. She was being slowly broken down, just like her students. What made the Krugers' experiment so dangerous wasn't just the poison. It was the psychology behind it. They understood something terrifying. When everyone is sick at the same time, it doesn't seem like a problem. It becomes the new normal. No one had a clear mind anymore. No one could step back and see the truth. And the brothers made sure of that. They controlled the mail coming in and out of town. If someone wrote a letter asking for help, it never reached the outside world. The few visitors who came were told the town was battling an illness, and were carefully watched the entire time. Heinrich Kruger kept records of more than just health. His journals, written in German, English, and strange symbols, described how the town's social structure was falling apart. Families were turning on each other. People stopped trusting their neighbors. The brothers weren't just studying mercury, they were watching how an entire community broke under pressure. Then, in December 1885, they moved to the next step, Phase 2. One morning, a wagon rolled into town, loaded with what looked like medical equipment. The Krugers announced that new doctors had arrived to help. Otto introduced 3 men in white coats. They spoke politely, acted professionally, and claimed to be specialists. But they weren't doctors at all. They were actors, hired by the brothers. Their papers and credentials were fake, designed by Wilhelm using his engineering skills and Friedrich's knowledge of chemistry. Everything looked real, but it was all a lie. The treatment center was set up in the old community hall. Residents were scheduled for appointments based on how sick they had become. The most serious cases were seen first. But no one was being treated. They were being studied. Inside the center were metal exam tables with straps, machines to test nerves and reflexes, and tools for giving carefully measured doses of new compounds. It wasn't a hospital, it was a human laboratory. And the Krugers had built it with money earned from selling mercury, and from European universities hungry for data. This was perhaps the darkest part of the whole operation. Back in Europe, medical researchers in Berlin, Vienna, and Edinburgh had strict rules. They couldn't test on people the way the Krugers could. But they were desperate for information. Friedrich Kruger wrote to them often. He sent detailed reports, charts, and diagrams. He told them the data came from a private clinic in the American frontier, where workers agreed to experimental treatments in return for free care. The universities didn't ask too many questions. They published the Krugers' findings in top journals. Some even built their careers on it, never knowing, or not wanting to know, that the clinic was actually a poisoned town. Meanwhile, in Quicksilver Creek, the so-called treatments were making things worse. People came into the center walking and talking. Some left barely able to stand. But the damage was slow and subtle, easy to explain away as just the illness getting worse. What the Krugers discovered next was horrifying. They could use specific types of mercury to cause specific kinds of brain damage. They found ways to erase short-term memory but leave old memories untouched. They could kill emotional responses but keep logical thinking intact. Every step was recorded, and every finding was sent to Europe. The children were not spared. Otto created a special program for young ones who had fallen behind in school. He told parents it was a support system, extra lessons and special care. In truth, it was a testing ground for new compounds and psychological experiments. Thomas Donnelly, the boy who once walked in perfect circles, had now become nearly unrecognizable. He spoke only 1 or 2 words at a time. His hands shook so badly he couldn't feed himself. Otto didn't try to help him. He used him. Thomas was now a test subject in a new study. Could the effects of mercury be reversed? Margaret Donnelly, Thomas's mother, was sick too. She was foggy, forgetful. Sometimes she couldn't even tell how bad her son had gotten. When she did ask questions, Otto lied. He said Thomas was improving. That he was responding well to treatment. Margaret believed him, and that was part of the plan. The Krugers knew that if the families were also sick, they wouldn't ask too many questions. Their minds were slow. Their emotions were dull. No one was thinking clearly. As winter arrived, the isolation became total. Rain made the trail to Junction almost impossible to cross. The brothers took advantage of this. They opened their final facility, a place for the sickest residents. They called it a hospital. It was really a death house. Inside were rooms designed for full-time observation. Glass windows, notebooks, and areas for examining bodies after death. Everything was recorded. Every cough. Every scream. This was the endgame. But outside the town, word was spreading. The government had started asking questions about the high rate of illness in Texas mining towns. And in February 1886, a health inspector named Drive Samuel Patterson tried to visit Quicksilver Creek. He never made it. His horse was found grazing by the side of the trail, alone. No one ever found his body. But Heinrich's private journal told the truth. They had found Drive Patterson before he reached the town. They gave him poisoned water, stronger than anything they had used before. He died within hours. Heinrich called him subject terminal external. He wrote down every detail of the inspector's suffering. The Krugers knew time was running out. But they still had one final chapter to complete. And they would do anything to finish it. To be continued. If this episode gave you chills, make sure to like, subscribe, and leave a comment. What part disturbed you the most? Stay tuned for part 4, The Death House, where we go inside the final facility, the place no one was ever meant to leave. The Kruger brothers of Quicksilver Creek, Part 4, The Death House. The building stood at the far edge of town, away from the church, away from the school, and far from the homes. It was quiet there, too quiet. The Krugers called it a hospital. But it was not a place for healing. It was a place for watching people die. Locals called it the Death House, though never out loud. Just in whispers. In truth, no one knew what went on inside. The windows were always covered. The door was always locked. People entered but rarely came out. Inside, the air smelled of medicine, sweat, and something worse, rot. The walls were pale and clean, but the feeling inside was dark, heavy. It was cold, even in summer. There were 5 rooms for patients, each with a steel bed, leather straps, and a table filled with vials and needles. Each room had a glass window in the door, so the Krugers could observe without entering. Cameras, big, bulky things, stood ready to capture everything. Every movement, every cry. This was the final part of their experiment. They were no longer trying to treat the townspeople. They were watching how long it took for them to die. The first patients were the weakest, men who had worked in the mine for months, their bodies already filled with mercury. They were too tired to protest when taken inside. Some didn't even understand what was happening. They thought it was help. It was not. They were given food and water, yes, but both were poisoned. Their bodies were tested every hour. Temperature, breathing, eye response, blood. The Krugers wrote everything down. Heinrich, as always, kept perfect notes in his journal. One entry read, greater than, subject 12. Convulsions began 4 hours after ingestion. Skin pale, pulse weak, eyes unresponsive. Excellent data. The screams echoed down the halls at night. But the town was too sick, too broken, to respond. Most people just pulled their blankets over their heads and prayed they wouldn't be next. But there was one person who wasn't sick. Her name was Clara Wilkes. Clara was 17, sharp-minded, and quiet. She lived with her grandfather, who had gone blind from the mercury but still had strong instincts. He had warned Clara not to drink the town's water. Instead, they used a private well deep in the woods, far from the mine. It had saved them, for a while. Clara noticed things others didn't. She saw how the Kruger brothers kept their hands clean but wore gloves when handing out food. She noticed that the so-called doctors never opened their satchels around townspeople. She watched as more wagons rolled in with barrels marked mercury, industrial use only, and were quietly taken to the back of the death house. And she made a plan. One night, she waited until the town was quiet. Fog rolled in, thick and low. The church bell rang 9 times. That was her signal. She slipped from her house, holding a notebook and a small camera her grandfather had given her. He told her, if you can't stop them, expose them. She moved like a shadow through the trees, her footsteps silent on the wet grass. She reached the back of the death house just after midnight. There was a window, one the Krugers rarely checked. She climbed a crate and peeked inside. Her stomach turned. Inside was a man she knew, Mr. Bellamy, the blacksmith. His body shook as if he were freezing, but sweat poured from his face. He was strapped to the bed. A tube ran from his arm to a machine that ticked and hissed. A second man lay in the next room, already still, eyes open but empty. Clara raised her camera and took a picture. Click. But the sound was louder than she expected. Too loud. She ducked fast. A light flicked on inside. Footsteps. Voices. Otto Kruger appeared in the room, moving like a machine. Calm. Cold. He didn't speak. He checked the dead man's pulse, nodded, and made a note in his book. Then he turned toward the window. Clara held her breath. For a second, their eyes met. Just a flash. But enough. She jumped down and ran. Behind her, the door of the death house slammed open. Stop. A voice barked. She ran faster, through trees, over the small creek, all the way to the edge of the woods. Her lungs burned. Her heart pounded. But she made it back to her grandfather's cabin. She locked the door, pulled the curtain, and whispered, "They saw me." Her grandfather sat quietly in his chair, a rifle across his lap. "I've been waiting," he said. The Kruger brothers were not used to being challenged. They had spent years controlling every detail, every person, every test. Now, they had a problem. A witness. Clara knew she had only one choice. She had to get the photo out of town. She had to let the world see what the Krugers were doing. But the trail to Junction was long. And the Krugers would do anything to stop her. That night, the town's last telegraph line was cut. The church tower caught fire. And in the schoolhouse, someone smashed every window. Fear was back, not just sickness. Fear. The next morning, a note appeared on the church door. Greater than, all is under control. Stay calm. Stay inside. Trust the Krugers. It wasn't signed, but everyone knew who wrote it. Inside the death house, Heinrich opened his journal and wrote. Greater than, subject Clara Wilkes, non-compliant. Threat level, high. Immediate action required. The hunt had begun. To be continued. Clara is the town's last hope. Will she escape, or will she become just another test subject? Like this story, then like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments. Don't miss part 5, Clara's Escape, coming soon. The Kruger Brothers of Quicksilver Creek, part 5, Clara's Escape. Clara didn't sleep that night. The picture she had taken was hidden inside a book on her shelf. It showed the truth, Mr. Bellamy strapped to a bed, suffering. And behind him, Otto Kruger with his hand on a syringe. That photo could change everything. If she could get it to someone outside of Quicksilver Creek. Her grandfather stood by the window with his old rifle. They'll come, he said softly. And they won't knock. Clara nodded. I have to leave now. Before the sun rises. The train didn't stop in Quicksilver Creek anymore. No stagecoach came in or out. The only way was by foot, through the woods, across the hills, then west to Junction. It would take her 2 days. She packed quickly. Food, water from their well, the photo, and a small revolver her grandfather gave her. Don't look back, he said. Don't wait for me. And don't trust anyone. Clara hugged him tight. Her eyes were wet, but she didn't cry. She slipped out the back door and vanished into the dark trees. Behind her, the first light of morning touched the death house. Inside, Heinrich Kruger read his brother's report. Greater than, girl seen outside window. Evidence may exist. Subject escaped. Recommend recovery. Heinrich didn't speak. He stood slowly and placed a hand on a large wooden box. Inside were vials of something new. Something stronger than mercury. He opened the box, took one vial, and placed it in a black bag. We end this, he said. Clara moved fast, staying low, off the trails. Every snap of a branch made her jump. Every bird cry sounded like a warning. By midday, she reached Black Hollow, the old mining tunnel that had collapsed 5 years ago. No one used it anymore. The trees around it were dead. The ground was soft with ash. She heard a sound behind her. Crack. She spun, pointing the revolver. Nothing. Then, a low voice. You're far from home, miss. Clara turned slowly. A man stood behind her, tall and thin, dressed in dark brown. A Kruger hat. He smiled. But it wasn't kind. Town's worried about you, he said. We'd like you to come back. For your safety. I'm not going back, Clara said. Can't let you go forward. Either. She fired. The gunshot echoed through the hollow. The man dropped, clutching his shoulder. Clara didn't wait. She ran into the collapsed tunnel, squeezing through gaps, dust filling her nose and throat. Behind her, the man groaned. You'll regret that. Dash dash dash. Night came fast. She lit a match and found a small cave by the river. It would keep her hidden. She chewed dry bread and sipped water. Her hands shook, but her mind stayed clear. She looked at the photo again. It was still safe. Still real. She wrapped it in cloth and placed it in a tin box, then buried it under a rock. If they find me, she whispered, they won't find this. She drifted into sleep, dreams filled with smoke and screaming. Dash dash dash. At sunrise, she continued. By mid-morning, she reached the hills overlooking the town's edge. She could see Quicksilver Creek from above. The church tower was blackened. The schoolhouse roof was gone. Smoke curled from behind the death house. It looked like a town dying quietly. Then she saw something move in the trees below. A wagon, painted black, 2 horses, 2 riders. Kruger men. They were searching. She ducked and ran the other way, toward the old telegraph station. Maybe, just maybe, she could send a message from there. The station was empty. Dust covered the floor. The wires were cut, just like she feared. But something on the desk caught her eye. A letter, half finished. Greater than, to U.S. Marshall. Stop. Town poisoned. Stop. Kruger brothers behind it. Stop. Need help. The rest was torn away. Clara felt her stomach twist. Someone else had tried. And failed. She grabbed the letter and stuffed it in her bag. Then she ran. Again. Dash dash dash. By evening, the weather changed. Clouds rolled in. Thunder cracked above. Rain began to fall, hard and cold. Clara was soaked by the time she reached the edge of the western trail. She saw something ahead. A cabin. She hesitated. Smoke came from the chimney. A lantern glowed inside. It could be shelter. Or it could be a trap. She knocked once, then twice. An old woman opened the door. Her face was lined, her eyes sharp. Who are you? The woman asked. Clara Wilkes. I'm from Quicksilver Creek. The woman's eyes narrowed. I know that place. Clara showed her the photo. The woman stared at it, then nodded slowly. Come in. Quickly. Inside, the fire was warm. The walls were lined with books, bottles, and maps. Clara told her everything. The mercury. The death house. The experiments. The woman listened, never interrupting. When Clara finished, the woman said, My name is Mrs. Talbot. I was a nurse once, before I left that cursed town. I knew the Krugers. I knew they were evil. She opened a box and pulled out a badge. U.S. Marshal Deputy, retired. Clara stared. Mrs. Talbot smiled. You're not alone anymore, child. Dash dash dash. Back in Quicksilver Creek, Otto Kruger watched a fire burn behind the schoolhouse. He turned to his brother. She's not in town. I know, Heinrich said. He poured something from a vial into a glass. A small mouse lay on the table nearby. It sniffed the glass, took a sip, and died within seconds. Heinrich smiled. She's out there, Otto said. She won't get far, Heinrich replied. But if she does, he tapped the glass vial. We'll have something new to test. Dash dash dash. To be continued. Will Clara reach help in time? Can Mrs. Talbot stop the Krugers? Or will Quicksilver Creek fall into silence forever? Right finger if this story gripped you, like, subscribe, and share your theories in the comments. Don't miss part 6, Blood and Fire, coming soon. The Kruger Brothers of Quicksilver Creek, part 6, Blood and Fire. Clara woke to the smell of fresh coffee and the sound of rain still tapping against the roof. Mrs. Talbot stood by the window, watching the woods. Her rifle leaned against the door. Clara sat up, rubbing her eyes. Do you think they'll come here? Mrs. Talbot didn't turn. They already know. That photo you carry. It's a death sentence if they catch you. Clara took the tin box out from her bag and handed it to her. We bury the truth and the truth still burns, she said. Mrs. Talbot opened the box, looked at the photo, then pulled a long envelope from her drawer. Inside was a map with red marks and names. Locations of the old mines, Mrs. Talbot explained. The Krugers used them years ago. Then something changed. People started disappearing. They weren't just mining silver. They were testing something underground. Clara leaned over the map. Testing what? I don't know. But I think they found something in the earth that poisons slowly, or maybe they made it. Suddenly, hoofbeats thundered in the distance. Mrs. Talbot grabbed her rifle. They've found us. Dash dash dash. Clara and Mrs. Talbot ran out the back and into the rain-soaked woods. Gunshots rang out behind them. Bark exploded from trees. A bullet grazed Mrs. Talbot's sleeve. They dove into a ditch, hidden under wet leaves and roots. They won't stop, Clara whispered. They want me dead. Mrs. Talbot shook her head. No, child, they want you silent. When the gunshots faded, they waited a little longer, then moved west toward a ridge. At the top, they saw the edge of junction. Smoke rose in the distance, something was burning. Then Clara froze. On the road below stood a black wagon. And next to it, Otto Kruger. He was waiting. Dash dash dash. Otto tapped his cane on the ground. His coat was soaked, but he didn't seem to mind. Behind him, two men dragged a third figure toward the wagon. It was Clara's grandfather. His hands were tied, blood on his face. Clara nearly screamed. They got him, she said. They got him. Mrs. Talbot grabbed her arm. We can't help him now. They're using him. You go down there, they'll have both of you. I can't leave him. You don't have a choice. Clara turned away, shaking with rage. Otto looked up, right toward the ridge. His eyes met Clara's. He smiled. He knew. Dash dash dash. That night, the fire came. Clara and Mrs. Talbot watched from a distance as flames rose from the Kruger estate. Someone had set it ablaze. Did you do that? Clara asked. Mrs. Talbot shook her head. No, but someone's sending a message. In the chaos, a crowd had gathered. Half the town stood outside the burning gates, watching silently. Then Heinrich stepped forward. His voice boomed through the night. There is a sickness among us. A disease that spreads lies and fear. But we have the cure. He raised a small vial. Clear, cold, deadly. We call it mercy, he said. People applauded. Clara's heart sank. They believe him, she whispered. Mrs. Talbot's jaw tightened. No, they obey him. That's different. Dash dash dash. In the early morning, the rain returned. The town was quiet again, smoke curling from what was left of the estate. Clara and Mrs. Talbot returned to the telegraph station. The wires were still dead. But this time, they found a man waiting inside. He wore a long gray coat and carried a silver badge. Name's Harland, he said. U.S. Marshal. Got your letter. Clara's hands shook. You got it. I got pieces. Enough to come. Mrs. Talbot smiled. Told you we weren't alone. Marshal Harland pulled out a notebook. Tell me everything. Names, dates, proof. Clara opened the tin box and laid the photo in front of him. He studied it carefully, then nodded. That'll do. Dash dash dash. But back in town, Heinrich stood over Clara's grandfather. The old man's face was pale. His eyes fluttered. Your granddaughter has courage, Heinrich said softly. She thinks she's fighting evil, but she doesn't understand. What we do here, it's the future. He held up the new serum. Pain is temporary. Progress is forever. Then he injected it into the old man's arm. The man gasped. His body convulsed, eyes wide with terror. Then stillness. Otto stood in the corner, watching without emotion. They'll come for us, Otto said. They already have, Heinrich replied. Dash dash dash. At dawn, Clara returned to town with Marshal Harland and Mrs. Talbot. They moved quietly, through alleys and side streets. The town looked normal, too normal. People smiled, children played. But something was wrong. Too quiet, too clean. Where's the school? Harland asked. Gone, Clara whispered. They burned it. And the sick house? Locked up. No one goes in. No one comes out. They reached the sheriff's office. Empty. Deserted. Then Harland stopped. Blood was smeared on the door. A symbol drawn in red. A circle with 3 lines crossing through it. What does it mean? Clara asked. I don't know, Harland said. But it's not just a town anymore. He looked around. It's a cult. To be continued. Will Marshal Harland take down the Krugers? What is the serum? And can Clara survive now that the whole town is watching? Right finger if you're hooked. Smash that like, hit subscribe, and drop your thoughts in the comments. Let's uncover this mystery together. Stay tuned for part 7. The symbol, coming next. The Kruger brothers of Quicksilver Creek, part 7, the symbol. The strange symbol on the sheriff's door haunted Clara's mind. A circle, with 3 sharp lines cutting through it, like a brand, like a warning. Marshal Harland stood back and stared at it, then turned to Clara and Mrs. Talbot. This town isn't just scared. It's controlled. That symbol means something to them. Clara nodded. I saw it before. Once, carved into a tree outside the Kruger estate. And another time, behind the church pulpit. Harland narrowed his eyes. That's not superstition. That's structure. They've built something. A system. Mrs. Talbot stepped closer. You think it's religious? No, Harland replied. I think it's science pretending to be salvation. They entered the sheriff's office, stepping carefully over the blood at the door. Inside, the place was ransacked. Drawers thrown open. Files missing. A single photograph lay on the ground, black and white, stained with something dark. It showed the Kruger brothers in front of an old mine, years younger, standing proudly beside townsfolk. Smiling. But behind them, barely visible, was a sign. Site 9 test complete. Clara's hands shook. That's where they started, isn't it? Mrs. Talbot nodded. That mine was sealed years ago. I thought it collapsed. Maybe they just didn't want anyone going in. Harland pocketed the photo. We go there. Tonight. They waited until the sun sank and the town dimmed. The people of Junction moved like shadows now, quiet, strange, almost robotic. Faces blank. Smiles wide and wrong. Clara whispered, do you think they're all drugged? Harland shook his head. Not drugged. Converted. Believers. With Mrs. Talbot guiding them, they left the edge of town and headed for the ridge. From there, they took a narrow path through thick brush and rocky hills until they reached a forgotten clearing. And there it stood, the entrance to the old mine. Wooden beams rotting, a rusted gate, and carved into the rock, faint but real, the same symbol. A circle, 3 lines. Harland lit a lantern. Stay behind me. They entered the mine, the air cold and thick with dust. The tunnel twisted downward. Old tracks still ran along the ground, broken in places. Signs of digging, of movement. Clara spotted bones in the corner. Not human, animal, stripped clean. Then they found the first room. It wasn't natural. Metal walls lined the stone. Old instruments on tables. Vials, syringes, notebooks covered in symbols and numbers. Mrs. Talbot picked one up. Phase 2 injection successful. Subject endured 12 hours before neural shutdown. Recommend higher dose. She looked up. They were experimenting on people. Clara's voice cracked. How many? Harland's face darkened. Too many. Deeper still, they found the chamber. Large, circular, quiet. At the center was a stone platform with straps. And beside it, a tank filled with green liquid, thick, glowing faintly. Clara stepped forward and gasped. Inside the tank floated a body. A boy, eyes open, but still. Hooked to tubes, marked with the symbol across his chest. Mrs. Talbot cried out. That's Jeb Lanning's son. He disappeared 3 years ago. Clara looked away. They didn't kill him. They kept him. Harland backed toward the tunnel. We have to destroy this place. But before they could leave, they heard footsteps. And a voice. You've come so far, Heinrich Kruger said. Heinrich stepped into the chamber, calm and smiling. Behind him stood 2 guards and Otto, silent as ever. "You must be Marshal Harland," Heinrich said. "You're late. We expected you a week ago." Harland raised his gun. "Step back." Heinrich raised his hands. "Violence isn't necessary. This town, this program, is built on order, not chaos." Clara stepped forward. "You're killing people." "No," Heinrich said. "We're preparing them for a new age." He gestured to the boy in the tank. "This child was dying. Now he sleeps in perfect balance. No pain, no fear, no thoughts of rebellion." Harland growled, "That's not life. That's peace," Heinrich whispered. Dash dash dash. Suddenly, Mrs. Talbot hurled her lantern at the tank. Glass shattered. Flames burst. The tank exploded, green liquid pouring out. The boy dropped with a sickening splash. Chaos erupted. Harland fired at the guards. Clara pulled Mrs. Talbot to safety. Otto lunged, but slipped in the burning fluid. Clara grabbed a metal rod and swung, cracking Otto's arm. He growled like an animal. "Run!" Harland shouted. They dashed into the tunnels, smoke and fire behind them. Clara looked back. Heinrich stood calmly in the flames, smiling. As if he wanted this. As if it was part of the plan. Dash dash dash. They escaped into the night. The mine collapsed behind them, fire glowing deep in the earth. Clara fell to her knees, shaking. They were turning people into things. Harland placed a hand on her shoulder. "We exposed them. That's the first step." Mrs. Talbot didn't look relieved. "But we didn't stop them." Clara stared into the dark forest. "No, this is bigger than Junction. This is just one site." They said, "Phase 2. What comes after that?" Harland looked grim. "Phase 3. Dash dash dash. To be continued. Will they stop Heinrich before Phase 3 begins? What secrets lie in the other mines? And what happened to the boy in the tank?" Right finger like, subscribe, and comment below if you're following the chilling journey of Quicksilver Creek. Your support brings the truth into the light. Get ready for Part 8. The third site, coming next. The Kruger brothers of Quicksilver Creek, Part 8, the third site. The fire at the mine burned for 2 days. Smoke rose like a black flag over Junction. But no one in the town seemed to notice. They still walked the streets with empty eyes and painted smiles. Clara, Marshal Harland, and Mrs. Talbot hid in the hills. "We hurt them," Harland said, cleaning his rifle. "But we didn't stop them." Mrs. Talbot held the burned journal they'd taken from the lab. "There's something in here." A map. 3 red dots marked as sites. The mine was Site 9. "Then what are the other 8? Clara asked. Harland pointed to one of the red dots. "This one's called Site 3. We go there next." Dash dash dash. They left at dawn, riding stolen horses across dry plains and rocky hills. Site 3 was marked near a dried-up creek bed, 30 miles west. The land grew quiet as they rode. No birds, no animals, just wind and dust. Clara spotted it first, a strange square shape carved into a hillside, half buried. They dismounted and approached slowly. The building was low and made of stone. Its door was sealed with iron and painted with the same symbol, a circle with 3 lines. Harland touched the door. Locked tight. Mrs. Talbot examined the edge. "Looks like it hasn't been opened in years." Clara found a rusted panel near the side. She pried it open. Inside was a switch. She pulled it. The ground trembled. Dash dash dash. With a deep groan, the door slid open. They entered, lanterns in hand. The air was cold and stale. The hallways were lined with steel and dirt, leading into darkness. Along the walls were faded signs. Observation room, containment, test wing. "This isn't a mine," Clara whispered. "It's a prison." They moved cautiously, searching every room. Inside one, they found beds bolted to the floor. Each bed had straps and a steel helmet with wires hanging loose. Mrs. Talbot studied a dusty clipboard. They recorded everything. Name, age, blood type, family history. Clara read 1. Subject 23, Eliza Mayfield, age 12. Compliant. Minimal resistance. Injection complete. Tears welled in her eyes. They used children. Dash dash dash. Deeper inside, they reached the main chamber. This one was colder. Rows of glass tanks lined the walls, most of them broken or empty. But 3 still glowed faintly. In one floated a woman. In another, a man. In the third, something else. Its face was human, but stretched. Its skin pale and eyes black. Wires dug into its flesh. It twitched, even inside the fluid. Mrs. Talbot gasped. My God. Harland gritted his teeth. This isn't science. It's butchery. Clara stepped forward and saw something worse. The woman in the first tank was still alive. Her eyes opened, and she mouthed a word. Help. Dash dash dash. Clara grabbed a crowbar and smashed the glass. The liquid spilled out, and the woman collapsed onto the floor, coughing and shaking. Mrs. Talbot rushed to cover her with a blanket. She whispered her name, Maribel. Maribel Stokes. They took me from the train station, 4 years ago. Harland knelt beside her. Who did this to you? Maribel's lips trembled. They called it preparation. For something coming. They said we needed to be changed. Changed into what? Clara asked. She looked at them with wide, broken eyes. Messengers. Dash dash dash. Suddenly, a loud clang echoed through the chamber. The front door had shut. Then, a voice filled the air, cold and smooth. Welcome to Site 3. You've entered restricted territory. This facility is now under lockdown. Clara's blood ran cold. We tripped an alarm. Harland helped Maribel to her feet. Move. Now. They ran back through the halls as red lights flashed. A door slammed shut behind them. Another ahead. The building was sealing itself. Mrs. Talbot cried out, we're trapped. But Clara spotted a ladder leading up into darkness. Here, they climbed. The shaft was narrow and steep, but at the top was a rusted grate. Harland kicked it open. They spilled out into daylight, into a cemetery. Dash dash dash. The graveyard was old and forgotten. The markers had no names, only numbers. Clara turned and saw the hidden entrance behind a stone wall, now closed tight. They were outside, but not safe. Maribel pointed ahead. There. That church. That's where they took us first. In the distance stood a wooden chapel, leaning to one side. Its windows broken. Its bell tower rotted. They hurried toward it. Inside, the pews were smashed. The altar was stained. And behind it, carved into the wall, was the symbol again. This time, with words. From flesh, perfection. From chaos, unity. From death, awakening. Dash dash dash. Suddenly, footsteps echoed above them. Harland aimed his rifle at the stairs. A figure descended. It was Wilhelm Kruger, but he didn't walk like before. His movements were stiff, unnatural. His face was pale. His eyes glowed faintly. He smiled. You survived Site 3. That makes you candidates. Clara stepped back. What are you? I'm what comes next. He raised his hand, and his skin peeled back, revealing wires and black tubes underneath. Mrs. Talbot screamed. Wilhelm's voice became 2 voices, one human, one machine. You've seen the beginning, but you haven't seen the core. Not yet. Then he exploded into sparks. Dash dash dash. They fled from the burning church. Maribel collapsed, coughing. There's one more site. Harland steadied her. Where? She looked up at him. Site 1. The core. That's where the brothers were made. Clara whispered, then that's where we end this. Dash dash dash. To be continued. Will they survive the final site? What truly happened to the Kruger brothers? And what is the core? Right finger like, subscribe, and comment if you're ready for the next terrifying chapter of Quicksilver Creek. Next up, Part 9 The Core. The Kruger Brothers of Quicksilver Creek, Part 9, The Core. The wind howled over the broken hills. Clara held Maribel close as she coughed, her body still weak from the glass tank. We're close, Maribel whispered. Site 1, it's buried beneath the old Kruger farm. Harland stared at the horizon. That farm burned down 10 years ago. Mrs. Talbot shook her head. No, it was buried. They didn't want people looking. Clara loaded her pistol. Then we dig them up. Dash dash dash. They rode in silence. The sun fell behind the hills, casting long shadows. In the distance, the scorched fields of the Kruger property came into view, dead grass, blackened trees, and the remains of a farmhouse. Maribel pointed to the barn. The entrance is below that. They tied the horses and moved forward, careful and quiet. Inside the barn, the floor was covered in ashes. Clara knelt and brushed the dirt away. A metal hatch gleamed underneath. Harland pried it open with a crowbar. A ladder led into blackness. The air below smelled like rotten metal. Dash dash dash. They climbed down into a concrete tunnel. Electric lights flickered along the walls. Who's keeping this place powered? Clara whispered. Maribel didn't answer. At the end of the tunnel, a door marked Site 1, Core waited. Mrs. Talbot hesitated. This is where it all started, isn't it? Maribel nodded. This is where the brothers were born. Clara pushed the door open. Dash dash dash. Inside, the room was huge, round, cold, and humming with electricity. In the center stood 3 massive pods. Each one filled with fluid. And in each one, a figure. The Kruger brothers, Augustus, Wilhelm, and the third, one no one had seen before. Larger, taller, covered in thick wires and bone plates. It wasn't fully human. Maribel trembled. That's Heinrich, the oldest. The first. Harland stepped forward. They've been kept alive here. No, said a voice behind them. They've been growing. Dash dash dash. They turned. A tall woman stepped out of the shadows. Clara recognized her from an old photo. Dr. Brienne Kruger. She smiled, cold and calm. You've made it further than the others. Mrs. Talbot raised her weapon. You did this. To them. To the town. Dr. Kruger didn't flinch. I saved them. The world is sick. Dying. We're preparing the next version of mankind. Clara stepped forward. By killing everyone. By removing weakness, she said. Pain, emotion, doubt. My brothers are the prototypes. Harland aimed his rifle. Where's the power core? Kruger gestured to the ground. Below your feet. Dash dash dash. The floor shifted. The pods opened. Augustus stepped out. His body now fused with metal, his skin pale as wax. Wilhelm followed. His mouth sewn shut, but his eyes glowing. And then came Heinrich. He was massive, 7 feet tall, his body a patchwork of flesh, gears, and bone. Clara fired. The bullets bounced off Heinrich's chest. Harland shouted, "Scatter!" They ran behind machines and control panels as the brothers moved, slow but powerful. Mrs. Talbot tossed a lantern. Flames erupted across the floor. Get to the core, she yelled. Dash dash dash. Maribel found a metal stairway leading down. Clara followed her into the lower level, cold, humming, glowing blue. There it was. A machine the size of a house, pulsing like a heartbeat. This is it, Maribel said. The energy that keeps them alive. Clara scanned the room. Help me find something unstable. They grabbed fuel tanks and shattered pipes, dragging them to the core. Above them, the battle raged. Harland was holding off Wilhelm with a pitchfork of live wires. Mrs. Talbot fired round after round into Augustus, buying time. Heinrich roared, his voice deep and unnatural, shaking the walls. Dash dash dash. Clara found a cracked valve. Gas hissed into the room. She lit a match. Run. They dashed up the stairs. Fall back. Harland shouted. Now. They leapt through the open hatch and climbed the ladder fast as fire followed behind them. The barn exploded, flames shooting into the night sky. The earth shook. And then, silence. Dash dash dash. They stood outside, coughing, bruised, burned. Mrs. Talbot knelt in the grass. Is it over? Harland stared at the smoking ruins. The core is gone. Clara turned to Maribel. What about the town? They were feeding off it. Now that power's cut, the hold should break. For a moment, no one spoke. Then, a breeze. Warm, normal, and the first bird in days chirped from a tree. Dash dash dash. They returned to Junction the next morning. People wandered the streets in confusion, awake, but unsure. The false smiles were gone. Children cried. Old men hugged strangers. A woman screamed as if waking from a long nightmare. The spell was broken, but the scars would remain. Clara, Harland, and Mrs. Talbot stood at the edge of town. What now? Clara asked. Mrs. Talbot looked toward the sunrise. We tell the story. Harland nodded. We warn the world. This won't be the last time someone tries this. Clara tightened her grip on her pistol. Next time, we'll be ready. To be concluded. Only one chapter remains. Will Heinrich rise from the ashes? Will the Kruger legacy die for good? Or is the darkness only beginning? Right finger like, comment, and subscribe so you don't miss the chilling conclusion to the Kruger brothers of Quicksilver Creek. Next up, Part 10, The Last Brother. The Kruger brothers of Quicksilver Creek, Part 10, The Last Brother. The sun rose over Quicksilver Creek. For the first time in years, the air felt real. No buzz in the wind. No shadows moving when they shouldn't. But Clara didn't smile. Neither did Harland or Mrs. Talbot. They knew something wasn't right. The town was healing. People slowly remembered their names, their families, their homes. The churches reopened. The schools rang bells again. But deep underground, beneath the burned Kruger barn, something moved. Clara woke up to a knock on the door. It was Sheriff Rayburn. I think you better come with me. He led her to the edge of the woods. 2 hunters had found a trail, giant footprints in the dirt, leading north. Metal mixed with blood, too large for any man. Clara's blood went cold. Heinrich survived. Harland fixed his saddle. Let's end this. They followed the trail through the forest, over dry creeks and broken hills. The prince led to a mine. An old silver shaft. Abandoned. Forgotten. Clara lit a torch. Inside, it was damp and silent. They found broken wires, tools, bone fragments, and symbols scratched into the stone walls, drawings of machines, of men with wires in their skulls. Blueprints, whispered Harland. At the end of the tunnel was a chamber. In the center stood a throne, made of skulls and twisted iron. And sitting on it, Heinrich, burned, damaged, but alive. One eye glowed red, one arm was now a blade. He rose, towering above them. Welcome, he said, his voice like stone breaking. You destroyed my brothers, my core, my home. Clara aimed her pistol. We'll destroy you too. Heinrich stepped forward, slow and heavy. The ground shook. Mrs. Talbot threw a flash bomb. Light burst across the chamber. Harland charged with a mining pick. Clara fired, once, twice, 3 times. The bullet sparked against Heinrich's chest. He grabbed Harland and threw him against the wall. Mrs. Talbot hit a switch. Rocks dropped from the ceiling. Dust exploded in the air. Collapse the mine, she shouted. Clara ran to a box of explosives, old dynamite wrapped in cloth. She lit one with her torch and tossed it near the supports. Boom! The mine began to rumble. Heinrich roared and charged. He grabbed Clara by the arm and lifted her off the ground. You could have joined us, he growled. I'd rather die human, she said. She reached for the last stick of dynamite on her belt. And smiled. She lit it with the torch still burning on the wall. Then dropped it down his chest. See you in hell. She kicked free and dove behind a rock. Boom! The explosion was deafening. The chamber caved in. Stone, dust, silence. Hours later, Clara crawled out through a narrow gap. Her body was bleeding. Her arm was bruised. But she was alive. Harland helped her stand. Mrs. Talbot limped out after them. The mine was gone. And Heinrich, buried forever. Back in Quicksilver Creek, the townspeople gathered for a service. They lit candles for the missing. They sang songs they hadn't sung in years. Life had returned. The fog had lifted. Clara stood at the church door, watching the people smile for real this time. No more wires. No more whispers. Just peace. At the edge of town, a small grave marker stood. It read, "For those who vanished, and those who fought to bring them back." Clara placed her pistol in the dirt. I'm done, she said. Harland nodded. We all are. But miles away, in the ashes of the Kruger barn, a small red light blinked beneath the dirt. A final signal. A last breath. The end, or the beginning. Fire. Thanks for watching. The Kruger brothers of Quicksilver Creek, Fire. If you enjoyed this full 10-part horror story set in 1885 Texas, don't forget to thumbs up, like the video. Memo, leave a comment with your favorite moment. Loudspeaker, share this with fellow horror lovers. Bell, subscribe to the channel for more weekly horror stories. You survived Quicksilver Creek, but can you survive what's coming next?